Hello everybody, just a quick catch up in this video on the building of the 20mm flak. This is the single flak and it's on the army mounting. There are two of these on the ship and I built one last week with the intention of putting it into part 10. But I had problems with the camera, lost part of the footage. So I'm building the second one here now as a bit of a catch-up really. So we've got a number of photo etch parts. There are 20 altogether and 4 turned brass parts. These are the pedestals for the platform. This is the turned brass barrel. And of the 20 photo etch, there are a couple here. This one here is actually the elevation arc for the gun, which is completely invisible when fitted, so I didn't bother with that part in the first build. And this part I don't understand what it is. It doesn't give any reference in the Pontos instructions for where that fits, and I've compared it with the anatomy of the ship drawing of this weapon and there's nothing identifiable on the drawings for that part. So I'm not sure what it is at all. It looks like a spade for the one of the legs, but there's only one of them, so I'm not sure what it is at all. It does have some folds on it as well on the back, but as I said, there's nothing recognizable in the drawings. There's nothing in the Pontos instructions except for them saying that you need this for the assembly, but it doesn't tell you at all where it goes. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the build sequence. So those two are surplus to requirements. But with the rest, we'll get on with the build, and we're going to start off with the platform, which are these two parts. And there's quite a bit of complicated folding to be done on these, which I'll go through as we build the thing up. Now, one thing I've noticed with the Pontos instructions, as opposed to the ones that were in the hood kit, or the hood photo etch set, is that Pontos don't tell us where the fold lines are on these parts. So you've got to work it out from the drawing or the photograph that's taken of the part already folded up, which is quite difficult, especially for a small assembly like this, where even when you go online and enlarge the photograph on the Pontos website, it's still not possible to make out how some of these are folded up. So there are a couple of clues, a couple of things that you can do to help. The first one is, if you look at the parts, on the fold line you can see a groove, and generally the part folds into the groove. So where you've got a line here, for example, on this section, this part will fold up so that the groove is on the inside of the fold. So that's the first clue. The other clue is to use the anatomy of the ship book. So this is the flak unit that we're building. It's a 2cm C30 again, in an army type single mount. So this shows in a bit more detail how the gun looks, and you can work out from this, compared with the Pontos parts, how the thing's going to go together. There are also line drawings as well, so all in all they should help us get the gun together, hopefully. We'll have to see. So we'll just move these to one side. This is actually a part. Okay, so we'll concentrate on this part, which is the main base. Sometimes when you put in these complex assemblies together in the Pontos set, it's difficult to work out from the photographs how things go, but as soon as you start to build them up, it sometimes becomes a little bit more apparent how the thing goes together. The connections with these are obviously very fine, so the advice is not to fiddle around with them too much, otherwise they'll snap off. And if they did, there's very little chance of getting those reattached. Sometimes it's possible just to flick the bend up. Okay, so that's the first part folded. So this is the front of the gun. I've got that orientated with the anatomy of the ship drawing. So that's useful. I know where I am with that part now. We have a similar job to do with this, and actually it's a little bit smaller if anything. It'd be difficult to do this without a good set of photo etch pliers. These are the Tamiya bending pliers. They're actually getting a bit worn now. They're not as good as they used to be when they were new. I might have to invest in a new pair. But you can see the very fine bull nose at the end. Just helps to grip the part really firmly. So that's part 299 bent up. Okay, so time to get these two parts together now, and I've worked out that this part, which is 299, fits over the top of 298, and that forms basically a box structure. The tricky thing is to get them all lined up. What might help us here though are these pedestals, because I think that they will go through holes on both parts, so they will line them up. I hope so anyway, otherwise it's going to be pretty difficult to put together. So I think that'll help us. We'll give it a try. So with those three pedestals fitted, I'll just lock them in again with some very thin CA. This is super thin. Now hopefully this top part should go on a bit better, because we can locate it over the pins of the base pedestals. So we'll just put the base to one side for a moment whilst we do the mount body, which is this. So it's a fairly simple fold with a plate at the front and a slightly more complicated plate at the back. It's got it's got 3 angles on it altogether. Just open the sides up very slightly, tuck the plate in at the back and just squeeze it together again. Now, one important thing with this is that there's a tiny tab at the back of the left hand mount body, the plate here, and that needs to be folded inwards, and that's to mount the sight on later on. It took me a while to work out how the sight fitted. It's not possible to tell from the Pontos instructions, but that little tab bent inwards is all that you've got to mount the sight onto. So we squeeze that together and I'm going to just put some super thin CA in here just to lock it all together. I'll just give it a squirt of accelerator. And that will set that nice and solid. So on the close-up you might be able to see that tab just at the back. Next I want to build up the breech for the gun. And there are 2 parts to that. There's this kind of an outer tray. This is the same assembly really for all the 20mm. I'm just going to ignore this strip at the front for the moment. That's got some folds on it, but we'll do that later once the gun's in position. So that's the outer. The actual breech for the gun is this part, and the difficulty with these is that the strip in the centre is so narrow that it's quite difficult to bend. So what I like to do is just get both sides started, but not fully bent up because it's not possible, the pliers are too broad. But just get the bend on the move, and then if we just drop that over the back of a knife blade and just squeeze it together, we get a nice square bend on that part. Now with this, again, we've got some really important tabs. They're very small again, but important, which are these at the end, and they just fold across. And they're designed just to support the gun barrel in the correct position. So just bend those over like that. So these are the 3 elements of the gun itself. So we've got the 3 elements of the actual gun assembled there. So the barrel into the breech and then the breech into the tray. Just making sure that everything's the right way around. So the only thing to note in terms of the orientation is that when you fit in the breech, to make sure that the ammunition feed slot goes towards the centre of the gun. And when you fit in the gun into the tray, that these lugs here face forward. We're ignoring this tab still at the front because that will be folded down once we get the barrel assembled into the mount. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to the base. just put the barrel to one side, and with a few pieces to add to this. The first is kind of another base plate circular platform that goes on here. So it's made up of two sections to give it some thickness. And this second one, which actually has a pair of marks on it which are slightly off centre, and they go to the front of the gun. They're going to mount the foot pedals later on. So just make sure that that goes to the front. This is the front of the gun. And then we have these three circles which go just above each of the legs, and they're the hand levelling cranks. Just wound the gun mounting up and down just to level it up. Just make sure they go the right way up, because they do have some engraving of the handle on those parts. And whilst we've got it, we'll fit the foot pedals, which are these minuscule pieces of brass, and the tiny little fold at the bottom just to stand it onto that platform. Okay, so that's the foot pedals, the hand cranks and the centre platform fitted to the base. So I'm guessing that the foot pedals were to traverse the gun from left to right, and there's an elevation wheel that goes onto the side of the mount, which we'll put on now. So that's the wheel, and it goes onto the right hand side of the mount in that sort of position. Then we have this piece to go on the mounting as well, which is the link for the sights. It linked the barrel to the sights, so they're moved in the same direction. It just folds together, and this goes on the left hand side of the mount. Fits in like that on the side. So that's now ready to fit onto the base. Okay, I'll just drop the mount onto the base now. Just want to make sure it's upright, and at the same time we'll put the gun in. Now at this stage it's okay to bend this tab down at the front of the tray, and it's just got a couple of angles on it. So they bend down like that in two angles. And actually that's the travelling lock. This came down and locked onto the bottom of the mounting. So that can go onto the mount now. It's not a very positive fit, So there are two parts to the sight. This is the mounting and this is the sight. And I'm not really sure why Pontos didn't give us this in one piece. I think it would have been possible to do it in one. Just a bit more work for us. And it actually has quite a few bends on it, the mount. And these are the important ones at the back, so it forms kind of a little clip. And if you remember, we bent up a tab on the side of the mount, and that's what accepts this clip. And then the front just folds up a little bit, ready for the sight. So we haven't got much to play with here. We've just got some glue to get on the end, and we need to try and see the tab. And then we want the sight on top of that. I'll get a photograph of this because it's not possible to video it really. Just a couple more pieces to fit. This is the gunner's seat, and the backrest just folds round just to form kind of a U shape at the back. And then that just folds up to form the seat. The mounting for the seat's fairly precarious. We just have a couple of tiny tabs which locate onto the bottom of the mounting. Fairly precarious attachment for that seat, but there we are, it's on. The last part is this one, which is really just a spade which goes on the back, so a foot that just goes on the back of the mounting. Okay, and that's all done. So I'll give that a coat of primer and paint it, and we'll see what it looks like with the other one that I've already built. Okay, so after a coat of primer, I've given these an airbrush coat of Tamiya's acrylic or lacquer acrylic German grey. A lot of which I've got all over my hands for some reason. You wouldn't believe it could be so messy painting a small part like this. The only detail painting I'm going to be doing is just to pick out the leather on the gunner's seat, and I'm going to use some olive drab, again a Tamiya lacquer olive drab, just to do that. That's barely noticeable really, but if you look very closely you can see a slight contrast. And the other thing that the paint does is it just builds up the photo etch on the backrest, so it's not quite so one-dimensional. So anyway, that's all I'm going to be doing with those. So because these are so small and difficult to film on video, I'm going to leave the video this week with an attempt at a kind of a stop motion build of these, because as I said right at the beginning of the video, the Pontos instructions are very poor for getting these together, and hopefully the close-up stop motion sequence will help you see what's going on and make it a bit easier if you're building this yourself. So we're all caught up. I'm going to be pressing on with the main superstructure on the ship over the next week, and in part 12 hopefully I'll give you an update on how we've got on with that. So that's it for today, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hope that's been of use if you're building the kit, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.